for me, our workplace is only as safe as its least safe person. And if we're changing the culture for everybody else but leaving those groups behind, then we're not really changing our culture. So I started with Rio nearly 18 years ago. I had my first 10 years at sites, learning the basics of our business, and my last 7 years in various corporate roles. Prior to that, I actually worked in elite sport, helping elite athletes pursue both education and employment goals, along with their aspirations to compete at Olympics and Commonwealth Games. And before that, I worked as a trainer in the police academy, actually for a while as a firearms trainer. And the one thing that all of those things have in common is that they were traditionally male-dominated environments. My academic background is in psychology, organisational psychology, counselling and HR. And the combination of those things meant that I was well placed to be able to step into the head of I&D when this role was created. We've had a big agenda on our plate over the last couple of years with our work to progress the Everyday Respect recommendations. Some of you may have seen that we released the Everyday Respect report in February of 2022. That was really looking at our culture to identify the systemic changes needed to be able to keep people safe, included and respected. It revealed high rates of sexual harassment, bullying and racism across our operations globally. And we know that only systemic change will be able to fix that. This isn't about weeding out a few bad apples. This is about really understanding the systems that created what was described in that initial report and reprogramming them so that we can have a better environment for everyone.
I speak to people in our business every day about the topics of respect, inclusion, psychological safety, and I can really see the difference that it's making across our business.
The Everyday Respect report highlighted several areas that we need to work on as a business, and I'm really enthused with where it's going. We need to listen to our people in order to be better, and with the formation of the task force, that's exactly what we're doing.
So the implementation phase has been a fascinating journey culturally for Rio Tinto. We have largely 3 groups of recommendations, one about leadership and behavioural change, one about our facilities, and one about our response when people need help to deal with things like sexual harassment, racism, bullying, or other forms of harmful disrespect. What we've really seen along the way is there's some key mindset shifts that we've needed to be able to sustain our progress. We need to understand that this isn't about individual accountability, it is about the systems. We need to recognise exclusion where it exists, because in Rio we've often used the 80-20 rule, and what we really discovered during this process is we often leave out the same 20%. And we need to really amplify the voices of those who wouldn't normally feel heard. And I'm really proud of the work we've done to stand up some employee resource groups. This year within Australia, our Indigenous team has stood up the Elevating Voices Network. We have globally then helped our gender and sexually diverse community, the Thrive community, go global. And we've also set up employee resource groups for neurodiversity and gender equality. And this will really make sure that we help amplify the voices of people who don't normally feel heard. I really hope that in the full transparency of the release of the report, that we've prompted others to think about the things that might need to also change in their organisation. Releasing transparently was something that we might not have done previously. It was unconventionally transparent, but I was so proud of our leadership team that they understood that transparency drives change, and that by releasing this, we could show not only for us the changes we need to make, but maybe for some other companies that didn't have the resources to be able to do what we've done, they might be able to pick up some learnings from what was in our recommendations and maybe start to make change on their own. I've been really humbled by the support we've had from other organisations and the interest to see, what they can learn. And we've really just tried to share generously about what our learnings have been along the way, in the hope for broader change in our industry, because this is about a rising tide floating all boats.
So one of the things that really inspires me about what we're doing here at Rio is, yes, we're looking at changing our own culture, but we're planning and hoping to share the collateral and our learnings with the broader industry so that other people and other companies can leverage off the learning that we're doing and then continue the change more broadly.
Driving positive change together is important because we need to stand up for our people. We need to show the industry and the wider world that we're doing better for our people and for the industry as a whole.
Rio Tinto has chosen to be honest and to be transparent. You know, we've been given permission to care, and we've been given permission to speak up when we care. Our industry hasn't always operated like that, but times are changing, and I really feel like we're taking the right step forwards.
I think one of the things that's particular to our industry is, at least within Australia, many of our assets were built in a different time for a different demographic. By that I mean many of our assets were built by men for men. And that's okay, that's our origin, but it doesn't have to be our future. So recognising the exclusion that that creates is an important step in being able to make the changes we need to become more inclusive. And it's not just our facilities, it's also our hiring policies, our processes, what we need to do to really make sure that we're removing the structural barriers for people to be able to fully participate in our industry. We're a lucrative industry. We're privileged to be able to work in a lucrative industry, but so far there's some demographics who are really underrepresented in our industry. And if we can more fairly share the representation of some of those demographics in our industry, we can actually create intergenerational change across Australia. I'm often asked what surprised me in the Everyday Respect report. And I have to be honest, I wasn't surprised by the prevalence data. I've been living in the research for a while, so I was aware of the types of prevalence rates that have been reported in the research. But there was one question that we asked Elizabeth Broderick to add, and it was a question that asked people to think about how confident they were that we could make change in the next 2 years. When you looked at the answers to that question, it looked okay at first glance. High numbers in the high 80s and 90% for people feeling that they were at least somewhat confident we could make change. But when you flipped it and instead looked at the people who had no hope for change, they didn't believe we could make any change in the next 2 years, that group tended to include people from gender and sexually diverse community, people that had had long-term injuries or disabilities, or our Indigenous and First Nations employees. And I think that's a really important data point to just reflect on, because for me, that says that our workplace is only as safe as its least safe person. And if we're changing the culture for everybody else but leaving those groups behind, then we're not really changing our culture.
Choosing to be part of our journey towards everyday respect has had quite a profound impact on me. It's personally changed how I work, how I lead, and how I show up, both at work and at home.
We still have some work to go, but the Everyday Respect initiatives have given us a platform to have meaningful conversations on diversity and the importance of belonging.
Sustainable change in this space comes from first recognising exclusion. And that can be really hard to do when you're working with systems, processes and structures that you're really used to, that have become normal to you, that have become a way of doing things. But by actually thinking about who's being left out, who's being cut out by some of those decisions, we start to see what changes do we need to make to be able to design these processes to be more inclusive. Sometimes it's really hard for people to get to that thinking, and we've occasionally used really left field type of things, like to say, okay, if our sites were to be designed by working parents, what would our sites look like? Or if our leave policy was to be designed by people from different cultures other than a Western Anglo background, what would they look like? Sometimes we need to really step out of our here and now to understand how what we do today is not inclusive of everybody.